just to educate the audience and myself, we were talking earlier about top-down forecasters and bottom-up forecasters. And as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't estimate Phillips curves or natural rate this, neutral rate that. You are a bottom-up inflation forecaster. You take more of an accounting approach looking at the individual components. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I'm also a little bit different in the sense that some of the top-down folks with the modeling, you're looking out the next couple of years. I'm more interested in sort of the next 6 to 12 months. And to me, if you're going to do that, it really helps to understand the individual stories that are happening within the market. So whether you're looking at the housing market or the auto market or so on, it really helps to kind of get a sense of, how the supply and demand fundamentals look in each of those markets, try to forecast that specific component of inflation, and then sort of add that all up across the various
So
components.
when you forecast the specific components, are you using traditional modeling techniques or just some special insights that you're able to, through your years of networking, accumulate and apply? How would you
Yeah,
characterize
no, I
your
think I think I'm
forecasting
just
approach?
using sort of the macro data within that specific industry. So, for example, if
Okay.
I want to get a sense of what's happening to used car prices, I still want to look at um, what wholesale prices are doing, right? Because that gives you a couple of months lead time on what people will be paying if they want to buy a used car, and those wholesale prices are still determined by supply and demand. At that level. So you're still looking at those sort of same kind of macro factors, but in the sense, just you're looking at the micro stories within each item.
Now, how do you know in advance which component? Now, as a time series guy, I have to ask because I'm so curious. How do you
Yeah.
know which component to pay attention to?
That might be more where the experience comes in of just having done this for quite a while. But certain items, it's pretty straightforward. So, for example, if you want to get a good sense of, just stick with used car prices here, but you want to get a good sense of where those are going, you want to understand then what dealers are actually paying to buy these cars at auction before they sell them to you on the lot. So you have a good sense of what, you want to be looking at wholesale prices. Well, what kind? Well, there's 4 or 5 big names in the marketplace that provide you with wholesale price data. So Black Book, Manheim is a very sort of well-known one. And those are the time series that you look at and then test against the actual CPI to get a sense of, the lags and sort of the fit and so on, and see how that works. And you do this across, and to be fair, look, we don't have this for every CPI item. Cars we're sort of lucky that we have this information.
Right.
Airfares is another space in which we can get a good sense of how those airfares are going to move, hotel rates. But, for items like medical care services, for example, you're really kind of looking much more at the patterns and seasonal patterns and how those shift, and how the trends look. Because obviously we don't have a lot of information to go on in terms of, what people are paying for individual
Sure.
medical care
Wow,
services.
that sounds like a lot of work relative to top-down forecasting. So, getting down to brass tacks here, what's your outlook? Whether you think about it as month-over-month
So,
change, and why don't
for
we
me,
talk
the
about
next several
PC?
months are really going to be, I think, good news on the inflation front. We obviously have seen kind of gasoline prices flatten out a little bit here, obviously much lower than they were last spring after the Russian invasion. So right now, the way things stand on energy, we've seen electricity rates come down, nat gas has come down. So on the energy front, I think things look pretty good. Those are probably famous last words when it comes to the energy market, but right now, I think that's a good outlook. Food prices we know are coming down at the grocery store, which is quite encouraging. On that core rate, which is basically everything else.
Yeah.
I think we're in for, I think, a good summer in terms of prints that are more like we used to have before COVID. So numbers that are more like zero point 0.2 core rates over the next several months. And that's going to be a function of several things driving those lower. So auto prices are moving lower, especially used car prices, but new cars as well. And a lot of these travel services, I know it's crazy because all we hear about is airfares are going through the roof and so on. Right now, airfares are basically back to 2019 levels. Believe it or not, for domestic travel.
Mhm.
You're traveling within the U.S. right now. You're effectively paying something similar to what you did before COVID hit, and that's a pretty big reduction from last year. So these travel services numbers are also coming down as well. So I think that's going to help us through at least September. I would expect a string of sort of softer 0.2 type core readings. And then unfortunately, it looks like we might get a little bit of an upturn around the end of the year, but still probably more like 0.25, 0.3 type numbers. But at the end of the day, to me, what's really important is these shorter term metrics are pointing to a core inflation rate that over the next 3 months should settle down to around 2.5 to 3%.
Okay.
Today, that's 5%. So we're talking about cutting that in half over the next 3 to 4 months. So I think that's pretty good progress.